Alright guys, so we got some brand new Cassette Beasts information that is courtesy of the recent Q&A they did on Discord. Now I know a lot of people might be thinking, oh, they were just asking about like, you know, inspirations and stuff like that. And while there are questions like that mixed in here, there are questions about post-game content, which we got some answers for, and stuff like that. So I think this is going to be really important. What I decided to do, this is the second time I had to record this because the first time my grandma called me and my phone went off, so we're starting over. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to skip through like some of the more personal questions, which I do think there is a place for, but I'm trying to like get through all the content really quick. I'll leave this linked below because I've read through a lot of it. I think it's really interesting stuff. I think you should too, but I will talk about the content-based questions and questions regarding like the first questions, like when is it coming out? And they don't give us an answer, but I'll be looking at questions like that. So if you want to see the full thing, links in the description. Let's dive in because Cassette Beasts is just hype, all right? So first of all, when's it coming out? Basically, keep your eyes peeled for more information soon. So sounds pretty good. How long will it take to beat the game? Most first-time playthroughs take about 30 hours. However, the open nature of the game can make this vary quite a lot. I know some people have played 50 before beating it the first time. On subsequent playthroughs, when you know where to go, it could take about 10 hours. Speedrunners will probably be able to do it within 3. That makes sense. Now, don't let the 10 and 3 like throw you off. Speedrunners can beat some crazy games in less than 3 hours. Like, look at Mario 64. The 120 star runs like, I think it's like an hour and 20 minutes or hour 30 minutes, something like that. So there's that. But when it comes to this actually makes sense. So 30 hours, you're looking at a little more than like a classic Pokemon game like Gen 3, Gen 4, Gen 5, where those games are about like 25 hours if you're kind of like pacing yourself. So you're looking at a little more than that, but with a bunch of side content making it take up to 50. That makes sense. Will there be any secret linkages between Lena's Inception, which was their first game, which is like a Zelda... I don't know if it was their first, but it was their game before this. It's like a Zelda-like game, which I've heard good things about. Actually, let me know in the comments. I know it's not a monster taming game, but I feel like we can kind of tie it into the channel's theme by being like, you know, the Cassette Beasts developers made this game and doing like a showcase video of it just for fun. Let me know if you guys would watch something like that. I want to try this game myself. I probably will on my own anyway, but I think it'd be really cool to do a video with you guys just to sort of gauge the Cassette Beasts developers' like talent on their other game. So they said you'll see a couple nods in the demo. They don't want to spoil it too much. They talk about how long they've been working on the game, and they've actually been working on it basically 6 months longer than when it was first announced. So that explains why like the first announcement came and it's been like, you know, 2 to 3 years since then. Why were Cassette Beasts the medium? They basically talk about how like they wanted to have something that was kind of familiar. Like other games do this, like you have Pokeballs, it's like a ball. You have like, you know, magical cards, whatever. That makes sense. Have you had the game play tested? Basically just by their friends and stuff. Performance targets for the console version. So our targets are 60 FPS on Xbox Series X and Steam Deck, as well as PC. And the minimum is 30 FPS for Xbox One and Switch. I'm surprised Xbox One isn't gonna get 60. This is their minimum, but Switch 30 makes sense. You know, you could love the Switch for being portable or whatever, but like y'all know the actual hardware is not that good. It's not that up to date. Will the soundtrack be available on Steam? It's lovely. Yes. I know why you chose a particular art style. So just talking about the pixel art and 3D and stuff like that. We're not gonna spend too much time, but here we got monsters. How many monsters are there? So there's 120 regular monsters, including evolutions. This gives 14,400 fusions. If you want to count bootlegs, rare palette and type swapped monsters, which are basically like the game's shiny system, but on steroids. There are 1,800 monsters with all that, and about 3.2 million fusions. Then someone was asking about predatory bird monsters, which we're not going to get into too much. Were there any types you guys scrapped? They talk about like they were originally gonna have an air type that would basically like wash away or blow away glitter type and stuff like that. They also talk about how they had some other ideas like paper, rock, scissors, glue, tiny, and giant. I think a glue type would be interesting actually. Was it hard coming up with the beast names? Again, more personal stuff, nothing too crazy there. Then if we go down to, there was another one I wanted to talk to a little bit about. I'm curious if you had heights in comparison to your player. So let's just like for fan art, we draw monsters similarly. Okay. Okay, were there any monster fusions you had to handcraft, or are they all handled by the procedural system? I think it would have been a waste to hand design a subset of fusions. Handcrafted fusions would have taken about as much time to sprite and animate a large regular monster, so each one of them would reduce the total number of monsters we could have in game. That makes sense, right? On top of that, out of 14,000 procedural fusions, there'd only be a slim chance that a player would ever come across one of the handcrafted ones. That's a beautiful answer. It makes perfect sense, right? Gameplay. Just wondered what you had planned for anything post-game. If there is is there going to be a post-game? So it's two questions basically asking the same thing. Is there going to be a post-game? There will be post-game content for sure, but it will be a bit different from what you might expect based on other games in the genre. We generally try to design the content that best fits in the world of Cassette Beasts. So that's fair. It doesn't have to be a battle frontier. It's people like post-game because it's nice to have completed the story and then have something to do after the climax to sort of like get into that infinite loop that's at the end, right? Doesn't have to necessarily be that. Nexomon had a really good post game with the Abyssals. The one, I guess you could say, downfall to a post game like that is like once you've beaten that post game, there's nothing really to do. That's kind of why I personally like the Battle Frontier having like procedurally generated areas, not necessarily new runs, just because like it lets you stay in that like completed save file but constantly have content. And then Tom also said there is a pretty substantial post game that introduces new monsters, characters, and bosses. So I'm guessing that's more like Netherworlds or Abyssals from Nexomon. I estimate that the post game adds about 10 to 20 hours. That's not even including the randomization and permadeath options that get unlocked for repeat playthroughs. Will there be new stickers? That's just, they said they might, basically. Are there any plans for post-launch updates? We can't say. We'll announce something, you'll hear about it. It'll depend on how the game performs, right? So if you guys want Cassette Beasts to do well, you got to tell people about it. Will there be online multiplayer? Couch co-op's available, but I'd like to be able to play with people who aren't with me right now. There won't be any multiplayer at launch. We're developing Cassette Beasts predominantly as a single-player experience. As for after launch, I can't say for sure. This is what I want to say. I've said this before. I was planning on making a whole video about it. Multiplayer is nice in a monster taming game, don't get me wrong, but unless you have a massive fan base, like the PvP scene is not going to stay alive. Like you could pick any monster taming, even Pokemon, right? Pokemon Showdown, sure, you know, like I mean that's one, like even VGC, sure, like the PvP scenes are pretty alive, but when you compare how many people buy Pokemon compared to how many people actually play PvP, we just go off Showdown numbers, it's like 10,000 people at a time that are online compared to 20 million sales, right? And like, to be fair, like a lot of the people that are playing probably didn't even buy the recent games. Like it's a tiny percentage. So unless you're gonna get a ton of sales, like look at Temtem. Temtem's gotten over 1 million sales, and I think their active player base is around 1,000, right? And a lot of those people aren't even doing PvP. So I don't think putting that much effort into online is worth it unless the game actually does really well. Trading's cool. I think trading's something that is worth it just because it's not something that requires as much time as like balancing for competitive. But when it comes to PvP, I do think that it's better just to take a sort of hands-off at first approach, build the game for single player, then decide from there. Let's see. Will there be... Okay, we already talked about that. Are there moves and status effects that are not on the wiki? Only the unobtainable boss ones. Crackerbones says, will there be an item to increase bootleg odds? In the post-game, there's a valuable consumable that can be used to find bootlegs of certain species or types. In a previous blog post, we mentioned rogue fusions, tough fused wild monsters that have a higher than normal bootleg rate. There are several kinds of rogue fusions, some of which can get unlocked late in the post-game, and the most challenging of them give the best odds for bootlegs. I like that the most efficient way to get bootlegs in Cassette Beasts is to use the battle system. That's cool. Are there mechanics, gameplay considerations, or ideas that you're really excited about? A lot of them are excited about the battles and the bosses and stuff like that. How did you come up with the idea for the loading screen tips? I'm not going to go through that too much. Again, you guys can read this on your own. I don't want to spend too much time reading stuff that, while interesting, isn't like directly tied to like the game itself. The island of New Whirl is one large open map. This is in response to how many open areas are there? About twice the size of Hyrule from A Link to the Past. There's some invisible walls you can run into if you exploit physics during the tutorial, but after that the limits are your knowledge of the battle system and physics skills. Local co-op in the demo had player 2 pretty handcuffed to player 1. Are there any interesting features or mechanics that are planned for this mode to make the experience a little more flexible? Having the two characters travel together is kind of the point. If they can go do separate things, there wouldn't be many meaningful ways the players could interact. It would end up feeling like two single-player games. There are games that can be support independent exploration and local co-op, but the mechanics of turn-based RPGs don't lend themselves to it very well. That makes sense. Like, if one person's battling, what's the other person really going to be able to do? I agree with it. They should be stuck together, like in the same area. What's the friendship/love mechanic going to be like, and how it'll affect the game? You can get closer to companions by completing their quests and by battling alongside them. Leveling up your friendship unlocks fusion, as well as a special move called Fusion Power, which does different things depending on which species were fused. And of course, the closer you are, the higher stats your fusions are. Each time you level up your relationship with a character, you learn a little bit more about them via a little cutscene that plays. There's also a romance option when you've maxed out the relationship meter, but that's completely optional and doesn't affect the gameplay. Oh, I was going to say, am I going to have to, like, just start smashing everyone? Like, oh yeah, just come here. I don't care what you are. Just come here and smash. Just to get the best stats, you just have to be a hoe. Nanite, are there any plans for challenge modes? There are permadeath and randomizer modes unlocked once you beat the story. As for other challenges, we're going to wait and see what challenges and the rules the community comes up with. That's pretty, that'd be pretty cool, right? So that's pretty much it. So we learned more about the post game. We learned more about the potential for challenge mode, the potential for PvP, co-op and stuff like that. I think this was honestly a really interesting Q&A. A lot of Q&As I've read aren't as interesting as this. Like, a lot of them will just ask a bunch of questions that, like, don't really affect the actual gameplay. I think this one did a pretty good job. Like I said, if you want to see the full thing, links in the description. But other than that, let me know what you guys think. Are you excited for Cassette Beasts? I'm pretty damn hyped. And if you do want to stay up to date on this game or just monster taming games in general, subscribe for daily monster taming content. You can check out my Discord, Twitter, and Patreon linked below. Special thanks to the patrons, especially Jim Hamilton, Dro Ghost, Dark Persona, Candy Morency, and Exodus. We're getting a lot of names up there. And until next time, peace out.